Welcome to The Bird Who Made Me Happy. This is Alicia Bridge, and I am your host. We're going to dive into the topic of what is it about birdsongs that makes us so happy.
You had a daughter and you bought a home.
When I think about why I first became intrigued about birdsongs, I can honestly say it might have been the stress of motherhood and the need to find some calm amongst everything. It could have also been my worry about the pandemic. Either way, I was on the search for answers for how to cope with the stress I was experiencing. And then one day, on a drive, I heard a bird song. And it changed me.
The times are different now.
My next guest is musician and philosopher David Rothenberg. David is best known for the incredible music he makes live with the sounds of nature and other species. He is a distinguished professor at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. His books and recordings in the field of interspecies music include Why Birds Sing, Thousand Mile Song, Bug Music, and Nightingales in Berlin. David's ability to open our ears to a new way of listening and creating with songbirds is captivating.
Hello?
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I feel such a privilege to have this time with you.
Thanks.
I've been diving into some of your work and absolutely fascinated. I want to know if you know why you, of all people, play musically with birds.
I think for me, when I was like a little kid, my parents moved us from New York City to Connecticut, to the kind of suburban countryside. I definitely spent a lot of time alone wandering in the woods outside the house, and I was kind of a little shy and liked this nature stuff. And I would sort of tell stories to myself and walk around. I wasn't that shy as a kid later on. In high school, when I became a jazz musician, it could be cool. And I was, before that, kind of this nerdy science type, interested in biology and things. Really, at that time, I was wondering, boy, how could these things fit together? What's the connection? And that's when I heard about Paul Winter, the jazz saxophonist who plays with wolves and whales. And turned out he lived pretty close to me, so I got to know him. So I knew this was something you could do. I had this model that someone had done this. I said, I want to join this band. I want to join the Winter Consort. And all the musicians in the group saying, you do not want to do that. Believe me, do your own thing. Do it your own way. It took many years before I really combined these things. Path. And what it also took to get me to come back to it, maybe 12 or 14 years later, was when I heard there was another like mentor type figure, R. Murray Schafer, the Canadian composer, who promoted the study of the soundscape. He's pretty close to where you are, because it was in BC that he started it at Simon Fraser University, the World Soundscape Project. And he was also a big inspiration. For his 60th birthday, there was a big conference in Banff, and I happened to be there. And part of that, and there I met like a tribe of people from all over the world interested in this stuff.
I have something from your book that I'd love to just start off.
Sure.
So in your book, you say, if a lion roars, we do understand him. If a cat purrs, we understand her. And if the voice of an animal is not heard as a message, but as an art, interesting things start to happen. Nature is no longer an alien enigma, but instead something immediately beautiful and exuberant opus with space for us to join in. And so I'm curious what your take is on the purpose of the aesthetics of bird songs. Not the purpose to another bird species, but to the ear of a human. Like, why? What's the purpose of being moved by their songs, do you think?
Yeah, why? Why isn't it birdsong just for other birds? Why should we care? Well, you know, that quote is a reference to Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher. And he said, if a lion could talk, we would not understand him. And that famous quote is about how the idea this alien being is in some other world. We wouldn't get it because they have a whole different experience. But of course, first of all, he's wrong about that, probably. But more specifically, if a lion roars, we understand the roaring lion, and we understand so much about animals because we actually are animals, and we're not as different from these animals as Wittgenstein and many people have thought. as Descartes might have thought. We're not so different. But when it comes to music, it's much more specifically a good idea to hear certain sounds as music. Because once you hear birds sound as a song, then you don't want to decipher what it means, because music doesn't mean anything that can be translated. You can't say, what does this song mean if it doesn't have words? What does the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony mean? Da-da-da-dum. Take away all the associations, all the movies it might have been used in that you come to your head, but it doesn't mean anything except this music. The meaning is contained in the sound. So consider a bird's sound as music, as many different languages throughout human history have. They've said the birds have songs, and many cultures have recognized there's bird songs and bird calls, and they get the difference in their language, which you get to what the difference is shortly. But the fact is, once you decide something is musical, you don't want to decipher it. You want to appreciate it as a performance, the beginning, middle, and an end, and has a certain emotion to it.
That's so incredible. I'd never thought about bird songs that way, but it makes sense. Can you tell me a little bit more about what it is about the songs versus the calls that makes them that much more joyful?
The music psychologist Elizabeth Margulis, she wrote a book called On Repeat. Why is repetition so important in music? When we don't like it in language, when we don't like it in language, you start repeating words, you say, come on, I got it. It's a glitch. But in music, any kind of music has so much repetition in it. Why do we tolerate that? She even did an experiment of kind of avant-garde music by contemporary composers. This music, that's what it's like. And then she randomly added repeats in the music and played it to different audiences, including composers of similar kinds of music. And everyone preferred the versions with more repeats. Because, of course, we don't get it when you hear it once. Almost any piece of music, if you repeat something, the listener is going to get it. And when we find a song we like, we listen to it over and over and over again. Clearly, we get the message, right? Why do we repeat stuff? Music works on us differently, and birdsong works like that. Like the chickadees going, doo-doo, doo-doo. That's the song of the chickadee, and they're going to do it for hours, and the chickadees keep doing it. It needs to be repeated to be grasped. The chickadee's call, which is chickadee, chickadee, dee, 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 chickadee, that's a kind of social thing, and they do that less. They do that when they're talking to each other, and you notice they're not going to do it so many times because the message is clear. The chickadee call is more like, here I am, what's going on, what are you doing? And chickadees have 25 calls. They've all been studied. It's one of the few bird species where humans could say, we know what it's about, but that song, just sung by the males in the spring, that keeps being sung over and over and over again because it's doing its role as a musical thing. You have to do one thing that birdsong scientists don't do, which I talk about in the book. They don't separate the function of this bird music from the content, from what it actually is. They think that it's very useful to say, the function of a bird song is to attract a mate and defend a territory. That might be useful, but it's not useful if you want to understand the music. Just like it's not useful if I say that's what Justin Bieber is doing. He's singing to attract girls and to build his reputation as a musician. Yeah, he might be, but fundamentally, it's only interesting if you like the music in itself, if it touches you in some special way. And birdsong can touch us as well as it touches birds. The function is not the thing in itself. You have to be careful about that. Just try it out on human music, and you'll see that these explanations are not very satisfying.
Yeah, well, and I think you and I would both agree that bird songs in particular are aesthetically powerful. And I think my question is, what is it about humans that we are so attuned to those soundscapes and can be?
Why is it something that touches us? That's the great connection between human beings and nature. We're part of evolution too. We have evolved in the context of all these sounds. There's no evolution of human beings without nature sounds. Everything that led up to our sense of what's beautiful comes from the natural world which we are a part of. Sure, the birds are not singing for us, but our sense of singing and what music matters evolved in the context of nature. And these songs are a lot older than anything we're going to do. Millions of years they've been around.
There's so much about what you're saying that makes a lot of sense to me, just on a very lay experience of life, which is that rhythm, that repetition. When I think about my children, that's the heartbeat. And in your book, you spoke of a group who, I forget what the bird was, but essentially it was correlated that it was linked up with their tabla drum.
That's a great story, and I've done much more with that story since, which was about how, a great musician is called a nightingale in Persian culture and Afghan culture. And so this guy, John, what's John's last name? Bailey or something like that. He got together. He asked these Afghan musicians, you ever play along with a nightingale? You call the great musicians nightingales. Bulbul. Oh, he's a bulbul. She's a bulbul. She's a great musician. But have you ever sat and made music with them? And no. So he played some nightingales, had the tabla player play along. Have you heard the example of that? So since then, I developed this whole project in my most recent book, Nightingales in Berlin, where I went and got all these musicians playing live with nightingales, inspired by this exact example. Yeah, nightingales are incredibly rhythmic. They sound like percussion instruments, not like a melodious thing. And it's quite simply, it's because human life evolved with these sounds, and even life today in a city of like Berlin, there's nightingales singing in the nights from April through mid-May, and everyone hears them. So it's a real part of our own life, our own aesthetic. Mm-hmm. Don't think that everything we do is on the screen and on Instagram and TikTok. Real stuff is happening. It's right around us. And the more you pay attention to it, the more you're going to have a better life. Doing all the stressful things related to the pandemic, you just go outside and walk, listen to birds.
Yeah, so it gets me to this question of this difference between being in nature and living with nature. And this experience of you playing with birds totally turns that concept of on its head of, I'm out in nature and I'm playing music, or I'm in nature and I'm playing with nature.
Because I get the sense that you really believe there is some interspecies music going on, that there is this back and forth, that you are not actually, there's not an indifference to your presence in playing.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things right away, which don't quite answer your question. But one is when I first remember doing this was when I was in high school. I had scholarship to go on an Earthwatch trip, which is like this citizen science organization where you can join, help scientists. So I went to the Sierra Nevada in California to help with this bird study with Dr. Dave DeSanti of the Point Reyes Bird Observatory. But we were in the Sierra Nevada mountains. We had to band the birds on one side of the valley. We caught them in these nets. We put these bands on them. And the rest of the time we'd walk around on the other side of the valley, seeing what they were doing and keeping on these maps. And I definitely have the distinct moment of like tracking some birds, and one of them was a goshawk, I think. And I was marking where he was going on the map, and then I lost him at some point. He's like sitting on a branch looking at me with his map of where he is going, tracking me, like this is like like then I start thinking, oh, what a crazy thing. This is science. Now I'm going to take out this little flute and just play, see what happens. So that was one thing I remember in the early days. And the second thing, you don't just take out and play, you wait. And this reminds me of a related story. The famous nature sound recordist from Estonia, Fred Jussi, who I write about in Nightingales in Berlin. He spent years recording these little bird song programs for Estonian radio, and they were considered so important that when the bus is driving and playing the radio, when Fred Jussi would come on, the bus driver would pull off to the side of the road, turn off the bus, and for the next 5 minutes you got to listen to this because this really matters. And he had made these astonishing recordings in the 70s, with very like old equipment. Like, how did he get such good results? And anyway, somebody recently, made this nightingale recording and released it on a CD maybe 10 years ago. The Hour of the Nightingale. And then Jussi said, yeah, you went out there, you put out your microphone, yeah, you recorded the nightingale. You think that's how you do it? No. You go out there, you listen. You just listen for 10 years maybe. And then you start thinking, and maybe after 10 years, it might be time to like record something once you've known where and how to listen. So he had a harsh critique for the next generation of people who just thought they could go out there and do stuff, So this idea, I wouldn't say I'm as harsh, but there is some point to listening a lot before you do any of this. And also to really do it well, you have to believe that you can open your music up to this new aesthetic from another species. Like I've taken a lot of musicians out to play with birds, and some of them just get out and play their music. Like maybe they'll play some Bach on a guitar, maybe they'll just play their own kind of trumpet, whatever they would do if they were somewhere else. They're not attending to the location, just listen and know and to join in. So the point being, yes, you have to listen and be open for this and change. If you don't change your music in relation to the music of birds, you're not taking their music seriously enough.
Yeah, and I get the sense that you are this co-creating collective.
I don't want to be performing for them. I want to make something together with them that no one species could make alone. But I don't know what kind of communication is happening. They're singing, I'm playing. I want to do something that's worthy of fitting into that environment. It doesn't happen necessarily when birds copy you and imitate you. That's a kind of primitive sense of communication that sometimes people are looking for. Did you change his song? Did he respond to you? I go, we're both out there. Sometimes there is definitely this kind of response. But other times there's really the sense of like making music together with a musician that you can't speak to because they don't speak your own language.
Yeah. I want to talk about that movement that you're describing. What I gather is you become incredibly present, incredibly aware into your surroundings. You're really immersed, and then you're creating. It makes me think about writers who sit there and they just, within moments, like here's a story, it just kind of comes through. Is it spiritual for you?
Probably. It'd be hard to know how to talk about that, about it being spiritual. Well, it definitely is I try and take these sounds seriously. And I take the result that comes. I take it seriously. Like many people think like, oh, it's like just a rhythm if it has a steady beat. Let's find those birds that can keep a beat. And some people study this and they're looking for this. And I'm saying, why would you possibly look for this when like the rhythm of most music is uneven and different and birds are doing different things? Like every time you go out and listen, there's always something interesting. Like we know that woodpeckers drum back and forth instead of singing to communicate. They go brrr, another one goes brrr. And here it's happening right now. Let's really listen to the rhythm going back and forth and say, okay, what's musical about this? So the woodpeckers are not at these moments pecking to get things out of the trees. They're drumming. But listening, I think, is something most people could do better. And in nature, you started talking about that. You bring your kids out there, tell them to listen to nature. It calms them down right away. They're paying attention to something outside themselves and the human world.
Yeah. I want to kind of leapfrog from there because I'm fascinated by these sort of roots of creativity. And one of the things that I've read that you've observed and spoken about is how different birds can and do create their own songs. And I'd love to know, is this something that you observe they do easily, or does it have to be right time and place, kind of like it was for you?
Like, what are the birds doing? Well, scientifically, it's interesting that most songbirds, and here we're talking about those birds that learn their songs, which is a subset of the world of birds. A lot of birds don't learn their songs. They just can make certain sounds when they're born. But those that learn, which are like all these smaller birds with more complicated songs, there are two basically types of learning that these birds have. You can have an open-ended learning period or a closed-end learning period. And most of these birds, interestingly enough, can only learn their songs in the first few months of life, and then they've got it. They don't learn new stuff. Your average bird has a few months in which to learn his song, and then he's got it, and that's it. But other birds have an open-ended learning, and they can learn throughout their whole lives. And these are the ones of particular interest to biologists. What's going on in the brain of an animal that can learn new stuff its whole life?
There's something for me about listening to bird songs that has changed me. that has redirected my attention. There is something about it that for me feels like it's a treasure, it's a gold. There is something incredibly valuable here. And I want to know from your perspective, what is that joy? What is that spark that it creates in you when you walk out the door, or let's say it's been raining for weeks and you haven't heard a bird and you hear one? Can you just tell me how it moves you, how it affects you?
Well, I'm still more interested in you. Like, at what moment did you find that listening to the bird song changed you? You started to listen to them, or did you start to, you heard something that you didn't notice before? Were you listening more closely? How did it start to change you?
Yeah, okay, happy to answer. I think that I've always felt attuned to nature in some way, shape, or form. And I've always struggled with, perhaps as a female, perhaps just as myself, the need to constantly be regulating and feeling and attuning to everybody else's emotions in the room. I think there was a peak moment of stress in my life, and there was a bird song, and I noticed how it shifted. It shifted my family's dynamics, that someone else, something else could influence in this. Like, I adore things that happen to us without effort. I love byproducts. I love getting something without trying. And all of a sudden, this bird started singing and it captivated all of us and it shifted the tone without me having to do anything. And for me, that is a moment of relief and also total respect to these birds. Like, you're not even trying to help us, and you are capable of just being you, and your beingness is changing our stress levels. So there was this feeling of being less responsible in many ways.
Listening is forgetting the name of the thing one hears. People listen to identify the bird. Oh, that's a cardinal. That's a fish crow. Next. If you start to listen, you hear all these odd sounds that are not in the bird books, that are not used easily to identify birds. You just start paying attention to stuff. I ran into this bird watching migration counter who was down by the river with this big scope. Like, this is a good migration time. I'm keeping track of what's flying through today. And he started listing all the things he had seen. And I said, you know why I'm out here? I come out here a few days a week because it gets you right in the moment. You don't think of your plans, your appointments, your schedules. You're just here. You know, all this is going on and you decide to pay attention to it.
I love that in speaking with you, there's something very genuine about what you're experiencing, that it might not be exactly the same it won't be the same for anyone else who goes out there and plays with the birds, but it's like this incredible opportunity that we have way more possibilities for how we can interact with our environment, interact with species, and one of them is just as you've done it, and I can tell it brings you a lot of delight.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to do more of it, I think that, you know, every day and more time spent in nature, seeing what happens, it's always worthwhile.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
You had